Scythe Tleppo, Chapter 11, Herbert. We come from a dark abyss. We end in a dark abyss, and we call the luminous interval life. Nikos Kazantakis. Camping. Occasionally the ranch had camping trips. This wasn't the same as camp, which was comprised of a roofless cabin in the woods, an outhouse, and a fire pit. Camping meant leaving the ranch to go on for one of a few types of camping excursion. Sometimes we went on normal camping trips. They packed up supplies before trucking us to a random location in the woods. Random location in the woods. Random location in the woods. Once there, we set up for camp for a few weeks. After being at the ranch for some time, I realized many of the camping trips served a purpose. Public relations. Public relations. They had pictures to put on their advertisements and website. But that wasn't all. When someone's parents came for a visit, especially high-ranking Scientologists or rich parents, the kids had to white glove the entire ranch, which meant cleaning everything until Peck could wipe a white glove along any surface without it getting dirty. After the white gloving, we all got sent away on a camping trip, and shortly after we returned, a new kid would be in the punishment cabin at camp. This pattern repeated several times during my stay. They didn't want upscale parents to catch a glimpse of the general population. Glimpse of the general population, LAPD. Only the kids already close to graduating could stay behind. Only the reformed Scientologists, mind-controlled. Sometimes, though, the camping trips weren't for public relations, but were themselves punishment. If our productivity statistics were consistently down or enough kids were in trouble, a camping trip would suddenly occur. Kids weren't allowed to bring personal belongings on punishment camps, which wasn't a problem for those of us who had nothing, me. Camping trips billed as punishment were brutal. Usually we couldn't bring utensils or any item beyond clothing in sleeping bags. There were no showers, no entertainment, and no communicating between groups. All day, every day was hard labor. Anything from moving rocks, building dams, digging ditches, or constructing fences. No one had training or experience. No one was qualified. Now do you see why Scientology didn't want this book out? And why most places you have to pay $200, maybe $300 for the book? You guys seeing the reasons? Food was made sparse. Mostly we ate things like hot dogs, cold out of the bag. Maybe I should send like 10 of these books to the FBI or the Homeland Security. You know, it's still going on, even though this was a few years ago, just saying. Uncooked ramen noodles from the bag or white tortillas with peanut butter on them as a treat for those who worked the hardest. The staff, meanwhile, had powdered sweet drinks, granola bars, trail mix, and the like. Kissing up to security by being a Scientologist or by doing their work for them could get you some of that. That doesn't sound like narcissism. If they favored you, for most of us, though, it was the cheapest food on the planet and boiled water from a pond to drink during the day. At night, we drank multiple cups of Scientology's CalMag formula, ultra-high doses of calcium and magnesium with vinegar, dissolved in pond water. It wasn't just working malnourished. For those who hadn't yet been on a camping trip, a surprise was in store. Without warning, staff and upstanding students grabbed the first-timers called virgins by their limbs and threw them into the nearest body of water. There was also an isolation tent for the kids who needed extra supervision. Their lives consisted of sitting around, bored, lamenting to themselves over the quality of food, which was even worse for them. They weren't allowed to communicate to others. The staff at the ranch made sure to laugh and joke with those upstat kids in front of any downstat kids who were treated with disdain. Everything was set up that way. The whole system was set up to punish in every way they could. The less you took part in Scientology, the more punishment was coming for you. When Sea Org staff came for inspection or during visits from important parents, camping trips could be as short as a few days. For punishment, on the other hand, they could last up to 2 months. The light. The lower ranch was a different ballgame. During weekdays, the girls came down from their home, a much nicer area called the Upper Ranch. At the Upper Ranch, the girls lived in an enormous house with some of the staff. It even had a large barn with horses. The females sent to camp slept in a tent outside the roofless cabin. One day while at camp, I wrote on my arm with a marker, "I am not Herbert," a sample from a White Zombie song. I desperately tried to salvage something of my identity by clinging to the music I loved. Peck saw this on my arm and said, "Yes, you are. You're Herbert. Herbert. Your new radio name is Herbert." It's a narc for you. I added that. From then on, they called me Herbert, specifically because they thought I didn't like it. I didn't care much what they called me, actually. Number 1, can you meet me by the greenhouse to escort Herbert to go see Uncle Mike? Radio jargon bolstered the staff's paramilitary image. Lone Wolf, Smurf is looking for you. What's your 2-0? 10-4, Oscar Mike, on the move. On one camping trip, a kid named Justin Camp and I laid in our sleeping bags, talking late into the night. In the distance was a horizon of trees. We were in a remote region of the Gila Wilderness, in the heart of New Mexico, as isolated as possible. As we chatted back and forth, we noticed a bright, flickering white light above the horizon. The light, a bright, round white beacon, was about an inch above the trees from the distance, which would have been around 100 feet in the air. It didn't move, but had a slight pulse to it. It was strange to us, because there was nothing out that far. At first, we thought it was a helicopter, which would have been very odd indeed, but it didn't change position. It floated. After a few moments of us debating what it could be, it suddenly flew down out of sight. It moved below the horizon at an accelerated rate and never returned. Justin covered his face with his sleeping bag, freaked out by what we had witnessed. I pondered a bit. I wasn't expecting this in the woods. When I think back now, 20 years later, I have no choice but to join those people who insist they have seen unidentified flying objects. I have no idea what that light could have been. It was big, silent, and able to hover for an extended amount of time before suddenly moving downward at high speed. There were no military bases, towns, cabins, or even roads nearby. It was just a bright light in the sky that moved in strange ways. The fastest graduate. Access to medicine or medical care was nearly impossible at the ranch. When a kid was injured, they were given one of the many Scientology-based spiritual remedies, one called the contact assist. Is the strange practice of slowly reenacting an injury by repeatedly touching the injured body parts to the object or location which injured it. Anyone else present is instructed to remain silent. So I want to interject here. This goes on often with small children, young children, and adults, which is 100% inappropriate for anyone who doesn't know that. Just thought I'd let you know. Scientologists, wary and suspicious of medicine, view the medical world as largely harmful. While in extreme scenarios, they will visit a doctor or hospital. Psychiatry and psychology and the entire mental health field are restricted most of all. The ranch was no exception. It was rare indeed to find medicine. Counseling was completely out of the question. The purification program, the infamous sauna sweat program, which lasts for a month or longer, was a vital part of the program at the ranch. I did the detoxification rundown 3 times in total to clean out all the toxins from my body. For a hefty price, of course. Sometimes the upstat kids with money and something legitimate they needed could go to the Albuquerque under the strict supervision of security guards. A lot of times these security guards are kids too. I mean, the sickness of all of it, it's just so sick. When kids try to run or cause a scene in Albuquerque, because, they're trying to save themselves, ranch staff members simply called the police to help. Of course they did. Wonder how much those police were getting paid. Anything for money, I guess. I finally found out how Scott and JK were able to kidnap me from my home in Florida. All parents signed over power of attorney to the ranch. So they were our legal guardians. What have I talked about, you guys, with the guardianship? Police guardianship? I mean, it's just repugnant. At the lower ranch, day-to-day life plodded on. I watched hopelessly as some kids graduated or left due to lack of family funds. Just tell them you're broke. They'll send you home. I was not making any progress, and I felt like I would be stuck there forever. Worked out a deal with a staff member. If I did extra work for him, like cleaning his room and his laundry, he would give me $1. I repeated that a few times until I had enough money to buy socks and underwear. It's so sad. Buying clothes was difficult. First, I had to earn enough trust to go on one of the Albuquerque supply run trips. Then I had to have enough money and permission from 3 different department heads in writing. Yeah, they're big on that. Wonder what Rinder knows about that. After around a year at the ranch, I got to go on an Albuquerque run to buy myself socks and underwear. The first I'd had since the hand-me-downs security gave me from the pile of dirt in the woodshed. Yeah, great mom he has, isn't it? While there, I secretly bought a bottle of extra-strength ibuprofen. I knew what it was for. It was my cyanide pill, like in the movies. If life ever got too rough for me, I could opt out. And life was becoming rougher for me with each passing day. In fact, life was rough for everyone but the staff. It's what they do. They divide people, you see? You see how they do that? They keep it all going. It's the division. Kind of like society, isn't it? What do I know? They could leave whenever they wanted. They were making money. Some of them were making a lot of the money. The program cost from $30,000 per year per child in the earlier days. Can you guys imagine this? It's a child prison that people are paying $30,000 for. And up to $75,000 per year per child or more in the New Mexico days. Or even $75,000. The staff told most parents that the program only took 6 months. This was true in a way. One kid did do the program in 6 months. He came, had no problems of any kind, was already a Scientologist, and seemed to be from a happy family. Yes, seemed to be. He immediately did everything on the program and left. It seemed like a publicity stunt to me, but it may not have been. No one knows. The shortest time other than that was a year to a year and a half. The average time was just under 2 years. There was no kid who ever left the ranch without doing Scientology. Not even the few kids that stayed only a short time. Every kid at the ranch had to participate in Scientology courses, auditing, training, and ethics conditions. We all had to do it. Graduating for me was not in the cards, and my family wasn't going to take me back, maybe ever. All I could do was endure. Life at the ranch was long, drawn out, and boring, even when everyone was busy. Days lasted longer than the nights, but even as the nights dragged on, there is no way to describe the despair I felt, struggling at the ranch. The endless days blurred together to form an eon of sorrow. So sad, he didn't have anyone. Nor did a lot of those kids. And the cover-up continues with a lot of these Scientologists, or ex-Scientologists. I'm sick of it already. Being at the ranch until I was an adult began to look like a real possibility. I couldn't talk to anyone in my family, but by their request. I had nothing and was nothing but a kid no one wanted, dumped at this ranch to become a Scientologist or live in a prison for what felt like forever. After multiple visits to the punishment camp, I tried to blank myself again. Ice Age. Laying in the dorm one night, I left my mind wonder. A vivid memory came to me, my mother's bed at our apartment in Hollywood, 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 was a California king bed, the largest I'd ever seen. Much bigger than this little bunk. Thought about the time I stole quarters from my mother's purse, which she left by her bed. Did that withheld overt actually matter? Was it wrong simply because she didn't want me to have the quarters? Why are the things I've done to her worse than those she's done to me? Morality is an interesting subject, but pondering it was making me sleepy. I was back in our old apartment again. My mother and I were reading Lafayette's books, because what else is there to read, right? She was explaining the secrets of the universe to me. On this day, she was explaining thetans and how they were everywhere in the universe, not just on Earth. I was full of questions and she full of answers. How did the Ice Age happen? I mean, like, no one really knows why Earth just froze. Was that a thetan? I randomly brought up, of course, she replied. How do you know? Were you there? I asked. No, but it was a thetan. He blew a hole in the ozone and whoosh, the air sucked out. My eyes were wide open. Everything froze over for thousands of years, she revealed. What a powerful thetan. I wanted to have that level of power. I wanted it so badly. I was in a kind of ice age at this ranch. Everything was frozen. I was locked in a frigid stasis, in the depths of despair. My mother in my life with her felt so distant, irrelevant, cold. I let old memories pass and drifted to sleep. Cantaloupe. The next day I ate eggs and cantaloupe, the delicious luxuries of the lower ranch, compared to camp. I waited until after breakfast before I informed the boatswain on decks that I wasn't feeling very well, and was convincing enough to get past his watchful eye. Everyone else was cleaning, and I knew I had some time before I'd be noticed. I reached inside a hole in my mattress and pulled out a bottle. I snuck into the bathroom and opened the bottle of ibuprofen. There were hundreds of tablets, each individually harmless, but I knew taking all of them meant certain death. I was about to learn that certainty is a deception. It's time to end this once and for all. This time I'm going to die. I'm going to find out what's on Mars, and if they implant me, I don't care. What's one more life in the infinity of lifetimes? If Scientology is right, then I'll just come back again as a Scientologist and try again. I turned the sink on and swallowed as many tablets as I could. I filled my entire belly. My mouth was dry from all the pills, no matter how much water I drank. Before I knew it, I felt sick. The last thing I remember was lying on the floor of the bathroom. It was the third major incident in my life involving bluicide. I considered driving a knife through my heart in California. I tried to get myself run over by a car in Florida. How about that, LAPD? I tried to get myself run over by a car in Florida. How about that, Clearwater PD? And in New Mexico, I tried to blank myself with pills. But like all the others, it didn't work out how I had planned. I came back on my bunk bed, looking at a blurry face. Ross was staring back at me. My body was in trouble. I felt like I was shaking, but I wasn't. I lifted my arm and saw that it was orange somehow. He was saying something to me. You all right? I wasn't all right. I couldn't move or talk. I tried to lift my head, but immediately began vomiting instead. The vomit was yellow-orange with the taste of cantaloupe. In it were many capsules, not yet fully digested. That saved him. That looked like orange cigarette butts, without the paper. Ross mumbled something in an annoyed manner and walked off. How's that for a narcissist? Narcissist. I laid on my bunk bed in pain, without any treatment. No one tried to do anything at all. See, no empathy. All this Scientology training is training people to be narcissist. Now, some of them are not narcissist. Some of them are just overworked, stressed out, brainwashed, and they're following all the policies, and then that makes them appear as a narcissist. I laid on my bunk bed in pain, without any treatment. No one tried to do anything at all. No empathy. A security guard returned, posted to watch me. I remained quite sick for a few days. When I finally recovered enough to start walking, they placed me on 24-hour bluicide watch in the isolation building. Yeah, bluicide watch is very typical in Scientology. LAPD, Clearwater PD. You guys are okay with that? Children always being on bluicide watch? You guys are fine with that? Huh. I guess you're fine with all the masturbation questions and the little girls and little boys being AR'd by grown adults. I guess you're okay with that, even though it's against the law. Once they were reasonably sure I wasn't going to try to blank myself again, I was off to camp for punishment. Of course. No empathy, no compassion. Children get AR'd, they get sent to punishment. Children try to take their lives, they get punished. And the PDs they're fine with it. I was off to camp for punishment. It was time for Scientology's ethics conditions yet again. See children getting ethics conditions. I had to go around the lower ranch with a security escort and a write-up that outlined how I had negatively affected the group. There's that groupthink stuff. And how sorry I was. So disgusting. I had to get signatures of kids and staff members. Yeah, that's that thing they do. Is that amends? You got to make amends? Because you try to blank yourself? Because you're being so abused? Who were willing to accept me back into the group. The condition of liability, its conditions, is little more than a shaming tool. Those who didn't like me took pleasure in signing that they didn't accept me back into the group. Once a narc, always a narc, right? They're breeding them in there. Kids trying to do their liability to get to the lower ranch always had a certain look in their eyes, as they tried desperately to get along with everyone they approached. It's called sucking up, like you don't have a choice. You're in the depths of hell, and there's no way to get out. It's really no different than all those women that are getting AR'd in the prisons by the prison guards. It was a look of shallow glee, like a beggar trying desperately to smile, while hiding dark emotions just long enough to turn the next corner. I eventually, as was a routine by then, ended up back in the lower ranch. Months crawled by, a year crawled by. I am never going to get out of this place. I couldn't escape, and I had no hope of graduating. Boy, they really did him over, man. They were slowly blanking him. My grandmother would never stop spending my grandfather's money, and my mother would never take me out. Well, they're having a good time. So, Mom didn't have to raise her child. She could just hand over all the grandfather's money and put him in this prison. Grandma didn't care either. Sickening. No one was coming to save me. I couldn't even blank myself. And to top it off, I couldn't eat cantaloupe anymore. They made me rich. I wouldn't be able to eat another cantaloupe for 15 years. I had to stick to the plan. I needed to find a way out. The ranch was a hell for me that spanned eons. I never knew what a free spirit I wanted to be until I was under total control. Then I knew. I wanted to be free.